Joining me now is Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina. Senator Scott, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you, Chuck. Welcome back from the South.
Yeah, it's always good to be there. Hey, I'm from Miami, though. We're so far south, we're north, as the joke goes. You called for Roy Moore to move on. A couple of weeks ago, you said you're not quite sure what you want to see the White House do. I had a spokesperson for the White House come on this show and essentially say, you know what, there is no Senate seat that is worth electing somebody accused of child molestation. But now the president has turned and he's all in for Roy Moore. Are you comfortable that the leader of your party is all in for Roy Moore?
Well, there are a number of people in my party that are not, including myself and many Republican senators. The R-S.C has not re-engaged in that race. So the fact of the matter is our party is big enough to have disagreements from the top to where we are, and we'll continue to work for ways to move this country forward by looking at the issues and the policies that will improve the quality of life of the average American. But within the party, there's going to be disagreements, and obviously we're seeing one right now.
All right. Roy Moore's, if he wins, you referenced the NRSC, the head of that campaign committee, Cory Gardner of Colorado, your colleague there, is for expulsion. He wants to see an ethics committee and eventually perhaps a vote on expulsion. Where are you on this?
I think the Constitution requires us to, if he wins, and still an if he wins, we have to seat him. Then there will immediately be an ethics investigation. We'll have a greater opportunity for us to look into all the issues, the allegations, and perhaps even talk with some of the folks who are witnesses. That will give us a clear picture. I've always said that so far as I can tell, the allegations are significantly stronger than the denial. And I'm going to let my decision be made by the breadth of information and evidence that I'm able to review during that process.
There's a few campaign elements being used here. Doug Jones is trying to fire up African-American voters. And he has this mailer out. And I know you don't have a TV screen in front of you, but I'm going to describe it to you.
I do not.
It's an African-American male with a skeptical look on his face. Big picture, and it says this: think if a black man went after high school girls, anyone would try to make him a senator. What do you think of that kind of campaign literature?
Well, it's getting closer to the gutter, honestly. I think a bigger issue is when you bifurcate the current issue between those who believe Roy Moore and those who do not. That is perhaps a more telling, significant sign. 71% in a recent poll of Republican voters, likely voters, say that they do not believe the allegations. So really a bigger question, other than the question that you just presented to me, is how many voters believe the allegations and how many do not? And when you split that, you find a very telling story.
You know, there's been some concern that the election of Roy Moore is just going to send a larger negative message about what the Republican Party stands for. You have been somebody as a leader in the party to try to talk about inclusion. I wonder if comments like this that Roy Moore said when he was revering the age of slavery, when he said, I think it was a great time in America at the time when families were united, even though we had slavery, they cared for one another, people were strong in their families. And then I thought about that quote and this tweet from Steve King earlier this week. And he says this: diversity is not our strength. And then he quotes Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, quote, mixing cultures will not lead to a higher quality of life, but a lower one. This stuff inside your party. Look, Senator Scott, I know you don't want to associate yourself with that, but it's associated with the Republican Party. What do you do about this?
Well, very little that I can do about people who speak ignorantly, and you just have to call it for what it is, number one. Number two, the bottom line is both when Steve King and Tim Scott arrived in this country, we were actually creating diversity because the Native Americans were already here. So that is just a ridiculous statement. Roy Moore's, listen, I wasn't supporting Roy Moore before the allegations. The allegations reinforced why I wasn't there. The good news is, thank God for leaders like John Ratcliffe, Trey Gowdy, Mia Love, a diverse group of young thinkers who will take our country and our party in a better direction.
I want to ask you about what happened in the United States Senate this week. One of your colleagues announced his resignation. Let me play a little clip of what Senator Franken said during that speech.
Irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual a salt sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party.
First of all, do you think it was appropriate for Senator Franken to resign?
Well, I think Senator Franken thought it was important and very important for him to resign, number one. Number two, I will tell you that there's no question that his statement was inconsistent with reality. The truth is that there are a number of people within the party who are not supporting Roy Moore.
Would you, though, talk about what he said about the president? At some point, given this moment we're in, should the president's accusers deserve time to sort of, in a formal setting, lay out their accusations and have them sort of, and let people judge for themselves?
I think people have had the opportunity during the 2016 election to come to a decision. The truth is, as you and I both know, Chuck, that the allegations or the accusations against the president were a part of the campaign. So most Americans, if not all Americans who voted, had the information before the election. So for us to try to relitigate the election is impossible. Should people who have been victimized have an opportunity to have their day in court or their day presenting their information, I have no problem with that issue.
And yet, if Roy Moore gets elected, you are going to potentially have another investigation into this via the United States Senate. There is no place to have another investigation outside of Congress about the president and his accusers.
No question.
And is that something that should change? Should you guys be looking at the president's accusers as well?
Once again, I think there are two very different scenarios here. One, the Senate has responsibility and oversight over our members. I believe that if he wins, we're going to exercise that responsibility. The people of this country have the responsibility of choosing our president they have chosen.
Yeah. Let me ask you this about the tax bill. You've been chosen to be on the conference committee. That one of the biggest disputes that some have to do with this idea of writing off state and local taxes. Let me ask you this philosophically. Yes. Why is it that corporations are going to be able to write off state and local taxes but not individuals? Do you see where the fairness argument in that sort of gets traction?
I think the question about writing off ordinary business expenses versus writing off state and local taxes are two very different questions. One has to do with businesses. The other has to do with how we treat high tax states like New York, New Jersey, and do we allow other Americans in South Carolina and North Carolina to subsidize those high taxes. What I'll tell you is that we are looking at ways to sweeten the salt solution. So we have challenges without any question. So we're going to sweeten that solution for salt. I tried hard on it.
What is that? I see that. What does that mean, though, when you say sweeten? Expand the deduction a little bit, or what does that mean?
There's a lot of conversation around the fact that in some of the blue states where the taxes are high, the property tax alone will not be able to use the $10,000 possible deduction. So allowing for income and property taxes, which would cost another $100 billion, by the way, to be options for folks in those states would be a better solution. And we're looking at ways to make that happen.
Does that mean you'll raise the corporate rate from 20%?
I'm hoping that we don't have to. We're looking at things that the two bodies have very different approaches to mortgage interest deduction, which would save us about $25 billion that we could use to provide more relief to the salt, or my sweetener in the salt, should I say.
All right. Well, sweet and savory is the type of cuisine these days that everybody seems to love. So maybe you guys will figure that out there. Senator Scott, appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your views. Thank you, sir. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.